I recently read Do Hard Things by Steve Magness. Our proudest memories often originate from our hardest experiences. Whether it's getting a degree after several grueling semesters, launching a business website after several grueling months of work, or finishing a marathon. Completing hard and worthwhile endeavors we can be proud of requires a high level of toughness. People typically associate toughness with complete confidence, brute force, and bravado. But real toughness is none of those things. Author Steve Magness has explored the science of toughness, and he's found surprising differences between the traditional toughness maxims and the science of toughness. For starters, traditional toughness says act confident, but the science of toughness says embrace reality. If you go to the start of a marathon, you'll see novice runners sprinting off the start line, acting as though the marathon will be easy. But an hour later, reality sets in, and those overconfident runners are walking on the side of the road while veteran runners, who respected the marathon challenge, go by. When the U.S. Army examined results from their survival training courses, they found that the soldiers who experienced doubt and expected the training to be difficult performed much better than the soldiers who thought the training would be a piece of cake. As a wise and experienced military friend once told Steve Magness, an ounce of doubt keeps me sharp. The perseverance and toughness you will display during a difficult endeavor will be determined by your expectations before that endeavor. If you underestimate a challenge, you will panic when that challenge is more demanding than you thought it would be. The key to staying tough is assuming nothing will happen as easily or as smoothly as you hope, but with enough time and effort, you can get surprisingly good results. In other words, have short-term pessimism coupled with long-term optimism. The next way traditional toughness differs from the science of toughness is traditional toughness says ignore the pain and push on, whereas the science of toughness says acknowledge the pain but maintain equanimity. Every hard and worthwhile endeavor brings a heavy dose of discomfort. When discomfort strikes, the amygdala, a small region in the brain that scientists call the body's alarm system, is activated. People who burn out at work have an overactivated amygdala that they can't calm down. To avoid burning out and checking out, we must understand our internal alarms and then quickly turn those alarms off so we can make smart decisions and focus. It's like getting a low fuel alarm when we're driving. The alarm provides useful information we should act on. But once we determine that we have enough fuel to get to the next gas station, we don't need that alarm to keep ringing. We just need to deploy the following 3 techniques when discomfort strikes. First, zoom out and explain. When I get frustrated working on a video, I zoom out and see myself from a distance and think, oh look, Nathan's getting frustrated. Explaining stressful situations to ourselves in the third person is an effective way to regulate emotion because we stop identifying with the emotion. In one study, kids who referred to themselves in the third person while working on a frustrating task were 30% better at regulating their emotions and staying on task. When we zoom out and explain, we increase activity in the prefrontal cortex, the inquisitive problem-solving part of the brain, which in turn decreases activity in the amygdala, since the 2 brain regions have evolved to balance each other out. Zooming out and explaining is a great way to turn down the volume on our alarm system. But if we want the alarm to stop, we must reappraise. When lifting weights at the gym, we can interpret struggle as a sign of weakness or as a sign that we will experience muscle growth in the coming weeks. When we take a test, we can interpret nervousness as a sign that we're not prepared for the test, or we can see it as a sign that the test is important and our bodies are providing us with additional energy to focus. When we reappraise, we identify ways in which discomfort is beneficial. The more we reappraise, the more likely we are to deal with discomfort in a productive manner, instead of running away from it or ignoring it. After reappraising, we must take the final step back to baseline by reassuring ourselves that this too shall pass. After this video, practice zooming out and explaining, reappraising, and reassuring by allowing yourself to be bored for 10 minutes. Just sit on the couch and do nothing. When your mind starts to get anxious and you reach for your phone, zoom out and think, hey, look how agitated, insert your name, is getting. And then think, experiencing this discomfort is an opportunity to practice my emotional regulation skills and develop mental toughness. Then think, just like every other emotion, this too shall pass. The last major way traditional toughness differs from the science of toughness is that traditional toughness says, forget your psychological needs and just do the work. Whereas the science of toughness says, satisfy your psychological needs and you'll work harder than ever. Humans have 3 psychological needs: autonomy, competency, and belonging. If you can activate a feeling of autonomy, competency, and belonging during a difficult endeavor, you will dramatically increase your odds of finishing that endeavor. Generate a feeling of autonomy by acknowledging that you always have a choice. Even if you're told what to do, you can choose how to think about it. Or you can choose not to do it and accept the consequences. When you feel like you must do something, do it on your terms by adjusting the variables. When runners complete a grueling VO2 max test on a treadmill, which measures their aerobic fitness, they push themselves harder and longer if they can choose the incline and speed of the treadmill, even if the range with which they can adjust the incline and speed is narrow. Next, consistently generate a feeling of competency by always feeling as though you're making progress. Reflect on the work you've completed the past few days to get to where you're at. Then focus on something you can do in the next 5 seconds to continue making progress. For a runner mid-marathon, this would mean reflecting on the miles she's completed and then executing the next few steps as well as she can. Lastly, generate a feeling of belonging by remembering the people or mission you're struggling for. A soldier on the battlefield can endure a grueling battle because he fights for the soldiers next to him. A solo entrepreneur can deal with setback after setback because she's on a mission to improve the lives of her customers. Steve Magness says, when we satisfy our psychological needs, we are allowed to fulfill our potential because our drive comes from within, so fear and pressure no longer consume us. That was the core message that I gathered from Do Hard Things by Steve Magness. This book will give you a set of science-backed tactics to take on difficult endeavors. I highly recommend it. If you would like a 1-page PDF summary of insights that I gathered from this book, just click the link below and I'd be happy to email it to you. If you already subscribe to the free Productivity Game email newsletter, this PDF is sitting in your inbox.
Who's experienced a lot of stress? Yeah, me too. But that is not my confession. My confession is this: I am a health psychologist, and my mission is to help people be happier and healthier. But I fear that something I've been teaching for the last 10 years is doing more harm than good, and it has to do with stress. For years, I've been telling people stress makes you sick. It increases the risk of everything from the common cold to cardiovascular disease. Basically, I've turned stress into the enemy. But I've changed my mind about stress. And today, I want to change yours. Let me start with the study that made me rethink my whole approach to stress. This study tracked 30,000 adults in the United States for 8 years. Some bad news first. People who experienced a lot of stress in the previous year had a 43% increased risk of dying. But that was only true for the people who also believed that stress is harmful for your health. People who experienced a lot of stress but did not view stress as harmful were no more likely to die. In fact, they had the lowest risk of dying of anyone in the study, including people who had relatively little stress. Now, the researchers estimated that over the 8 years they were tracking deaths, 182,000 Americans died prematurely, not from stress, but from the belief that stress is bad for you. But I fear that something I've been teaching for the last 10 years is doing more harm than good, and it has to do with stress. For years, I've been telling people stress makes you sick. It increases the risk of everything from the common cold to cardiovascular disease. Basically, I've turned stress into the enemy. But I've changed my mind about stress, and today, I want to change yours. Let me start with the study that made me rethink my whole approach to stress. This study tracked 30,000 adults in the United States for 8 years. Some bad news first. People who experienced a lot of stress in the previous year had a 43% increased risk of dying. But that was only true for the people who also believed that stress is harmful for your health. People who experienced a lot of stress but did not view stress as harmful were no more likely to die. In fact, they had the lowest risk of dying of anyone in the study, including people who had relatively little stress. Now, the researchers estimated that over the 8 years they were tracking deaths, 182,000 Americans died prematurely, not from stress, but from the belief that stress is bad for you. That is over 20,000 deaths a year. Now, if that estimate is correct, that would make believing stress is bad for you the 15th largest cause of death in the United States last year. You can see why this study freaked me out. Here I've been spending so much energy telling people stress is bad for your health. So this study got me wondering, can changing how you think about stress make you healthier? And here the science says yes. When you change your mind about stress, you can change your body's response to stress. Okay, so you get the idea. Now, if you were actually in this study, you'd probably be a little stressed out. Your heart might be pounding, you might be breathing faster, maybe breaking out into a sweat. And normally we interpret these physical changes as anxiety or signs that we aren't coping very well with the pressure. But what if you viewed them instead as signs that your body was energized, was preparing you to meet this challenge? Now, that is exactly what participants were told in a study conducted at Harvard University. Before they went through the social stress test, they were taught to rethink their stress response as helpful. That pounding heart is preparing you for action. If you're breathing faster, it's no problem. It's getting more oxygen to your brain. And participants who learned to view the stress response as helpful for their performance, well, they were less stressed out, less anxious, more confident. But the most fascinating finding to me was how their physical stress response changed. Now, in a typical stress response, your heart rate goes up and your blood vessels constrict like this. And this is one of the reasons that chronic stress is sometimes associated with cardiovascular disease. It's not really healthy to be in this state all the time. But in the study, when participants viewed their stress response as helpful, their blood vessels stayed relaxed like this. Their heart was still pounding, but this is a much healthier cardiovascular profile. It actually looks a lot like what happens in moments of joy. Over a lifetime of stressful experiences, this one biological change could be the difference between a stress-induced heart attack at age 50 and living well into your 90s. And this is really what the new science of stress reveals, that how you think about stress matters. So my goal as a health psychologist has changed. I no longer want to get rid of your stress. I want to make you better at stress. And we just did a little intervention. If you raised your hand and said you'd had a lot of stress in the last year, we could have saved your life. Because hopefully the next time your heart is pounding from stress, you're going to remember this talk and you're going to think to yourself, this is my body helping me rise to this challenge. And when you view stress in that way, your body believes you. I want to finish by telling you about one more study. And listen up, because this study could also save a life. This study tracked about 1,000 adults in the United States, and they ranged in age from 34 to 93. And they started the study by asking, how much stress have you experienced in the last year? They also asked, how much time have you spent helping out friends, neighbors, people in your community? And then they used public records for the next 5 years to find out who died. Okay, so the bad news first. For every major stressful life experience, like financial difficulties or family crisis, that increased the risk of dying by 30%. But, and I hope you are expecting a but by now, but that wasn't true for everyone. People who spent time caring for others showed absolutely no stress-related increase in dying, 0. Caring created resilience. And so we see once again that the harmful effects of stress on your health are not inevitable. How you think and how you act can transform your experience of stress. When you choose to view your stress response as helpful, you create the biology of courage. Now, I wouldn't necessarily ask for more stressful experiences in my life, but this science has given me a whole new appreciation for stress. The compassionate heart that finds joy and meaning in connecting with others. And yes, your pounding physical heart working so hard to give you strength and energy. And when you choose to view stress in this way, you're not just getting better at stress, you're actually making a pretty profound statement. You're saying that you can trust yourself to handle life's challenges. And you're remembering that you don't have to face them alone. Thank you.